The empire that was under the 15-year rule of Ludus's father and elder brother was said to have been forsaken by the invasions of magic and rampant corruption. All that while, Ludus's father and elder brother were killed in battle, and so Ludus was to be put as the next ruler. So, the imperial family originally intended to turn the young Ludus without a political base into a puppet. So, he was upset about that, for being a ruler treated as mere decoration. Therefore, along with Ludus's servants and magic, he claimed victory in many battles, increased the budget for the people, and paved the way for the emperor's involvement in politics. But right then, the people wanted them to kill the demon lord's bastard. The people's perception of Ludus's father painted a picture of a ruler who squandered their hard-earned taxes on extravagant living, fueling their continued struggle with poverty. This misconception deeply troubled Ludus, witnessing firsthand the pervasive belittlement and misrepresentation of his father's legacy. The persistent disparagement fueled a growing resolve within Ludus. Meanwhile, as the chaos was going on, the demons were also planning to avenge their Ludus since he was their lord, and he was the one those humans were referring to as the demon lord's bastards. Therefore, they wanted to avenge him. There was a particular reason why he called that. It was his father's mark. His father, the emperor's mark, is a power that can appear in the emperor's family, as it gives one the ability to conquer humans, dragons, and even sacred creatures. However, Ludus's mark's ability is only for magic beast subjugation for some reason. That magic was said to have brought fear and ostracism from the imperial family as he was locked in the Academy of Magic. However, his father's mark was a great help to the Academy of Magic. The more magic beasts he subjugated, the more his magic power increased, making it easy for him to acquire high-level magic. Despite ascending to the position of emperor, Ludus found the shadow of the demon lord's descendants looming over his reputation. Seeking to distance himself from this contentious issue, Ludus summoned the demons. They urged them to steer clear of the matter, advocating for their escape to avoid further conflict. However, the demons stood firm, expressing their determination to fight on Ludus's behalf. Understanding the futility of engaging in conflict as a means to resolve the issue, Ludus conveyed to the demons that fighting would only perpetuate the cycle of war among humans. Despite his reluctance, Ludus possessed the power to command absolute obedience through his emperor's mark. This unparalleled authority allowed him to ensure compliance. However, he grappled with the ethical implications of exercising such dominion over others. Faced with limited options, Ludus reluctantly considered resorting to this ultimate authority to bring about resolution, albeit with a heavy heart. Ludus faced a difficult decision regarding the demons' insistence on fighting for him. Despite their persistence, he urged them to escape to the weather and swiftly cross the central mountain range to avoid further conflict. This direction signaled the end of their master bond. This decision left Ludus feeling regretful, though he concealed these emotions from the demons. For Ludus, this choice seemed to be in the demons' best interest, believing it was the optimal way to safeguard them. However, his actions didn't sway the harsh treatment he received from the people. The populace, convinced that Ludus was responsible for misusing their taxes and perpetuating their enduring poverty, continued to mistreat him. Despite attempts to explain and reason with them, their ears remained closed to his explanations. Instead, they schemed to seize the treasures Ludus possessed. Facing their hostility and recognizing their desperation, Ludus resolutely informed them that he carried no treasures and challenged their intentions, daring them to take his life if they were indeed that desperate. This confrontation highlighted Ludus's resolve in the face of adversity, even as the situation grew increasingly fraught and hostile. The anguish of a man among the protesters pierced through, recounting the loss of his wife 8 years prior, a tragic consequence of the war led by the emperor at that time. The man attributed his wife's untimely death to the conflict, expressing that she might have survived had it not been for the dangers posed by magical beasts during those tumultuous times. Ludus, reflecting on the timeline, realized that 8 years ago, he was still under the rule of his elder brother. Despite Ludus's efforts to explain and reconcile, it became evident that the people were no longer willing to listen or understand his perspective. Faced with their unyielding resentment and pain, Ludus, acknowledging their suffering, offered a stark suggestion. He was willing to comply if his demise would bring them solace or closure, signaling his readiness to face the consequences of their grievances. Ludus, looking back at his life, remembered how he was locked in the Academy of Magic like a bit of a bird in a cage. After being forced to become emperor, he went to war one after the other. However, one thing about him was that he really enjoyed learning magic. He was so obsessed with the place that he wondered if the place had an afterlife where he thought he could probably be accessible. Before he knew about it, he started hearing some languages he could not understand, since he had not heard them before. Later on, he discovered that he had been reincarnated. Ludus grappled with disbelief at the notion of reincarnation. He had always dismissed the claims of priests who spoke of such matters, finding it challenging to fathom the concept of rebirth. Yet here he was, seemingly reborn into a peasant family with the peculiarity of retaining the same name, Ludus. This striking coincidence raised doubts in his mind. Ludus's name was common within the village, making it seem like a mere happenstance rather than a deliberate link to his past life. Despite the uncanny alignment of names, he remained skeptical, unwilling to readily accept the idea of reincarnation. The perplexing circumstances surrounding his rebirth left Ludus grappling with conflicting thoughts, unsure of how to reconcile his disbelief with the unexplained similarities in his current life. Not long after, news was passed that the village chief had died. But Ludus tried checking the condition of the chief to observe what was wrong with him. When he diagnosed the condition, he saw that the chief only had a cold, so it was curable. Then he decided to offer help and revive the chief, which everyone was surprised about. Then Ludus wondered why they were unable to use magic, so the bad feelings he had been having in that village were probably due to the inability to use magic. And because of that, he gradually gained back his magic instinct, though his magic power had shrunk to an average level, so he needed to pay attention to how he used it. But he knew that if the demons, who were his servants, were there with him, the magic power would have never been an issue. Even after becoming emperor, he had no freedom to move around as he wanted. Still, he is now free of those chains in that village. But there was an old man whom he met up with in the village. The old man was putting him through that and letting him know that a peasant like him cannot leave the village on their own, so there are two ways for him to leave. The first way is for him to become a soldier under a lord and be ahead that way. After leaving the village, he would be assigned to work in a town or a castle. Ludus was taken aback upon learning about another potential path, becoming an adventurer, appealing to Ludus's aspirations for exploration and his quest for broader experiences. The old man then leaves him to decide which he wants to choose, because both are difficult work. Still, he said he would become an adventurer, as he seemed interested in that, and so the old man told him that he would prepare an application form then. Ludus approached his parents with a fervent desire to embark on the path of an adventurer, a decision met with initial apprehension due to the inherent dangers of the profession. Despite their initial opposition, Ludus persisted, employing persuasive arguments over several discussions to sway their stance. Eventually, his unwavering determination and compelling reasoning won over his parents, who reluctantly consented to his aspirations. The poignant moment was marked by bittersweet goodbyes as Ludus set forth on his journey, heading towards the dungeon, the very reason that had initially inspired his decision to become an adventurer. Upon his arrival at the guild, he found himself familiar with the array of weaponry, reminiscent of the armaments he had encountered in his former home, the Empire. Notably, Ludus encountered a barrier, the written language. The characters were inscrutable, and the spoken language differed significantly from what he was accustomed to in the Empire. Approaching the receptionists with a resolve to register as an adventurer, Ludus candidly disclosed his humble origins, revealing his background as someone from a more ordinary upbringing. The guild explained that he needed to demonstrate his ability to defeat magical creatures as a testament to his potential as an adventurer. The task was outlined. He had to venture into dungeons, confront these mystical beasts, and retrieve a specific item, be it a body part, an accessory, or a weapon, from the defeated creature. Nevertheless, as he ventured into the urban city forest to pursue these creatures, he realized that the fundamental relationship between humans and magical beasts remained unaltered. In this realm, a deep-seated animosity existed between humans and magical beasts. Some of these creatures, in his estimation, posed no threat, and he had even managed to forge alliances, turning a few into his loyal companions or servants. However, Ludus found himself without his trusted allies in the current scenario. As Ludus continued his journey through the forest, he sensed a small concentration of magical energy, a sign that a miniature magical creature might be nearby. Following this instinct, he stumbled upon a cave. Using his abilities in light magic, he illuminated the cave's interior to gain clearer visibility. Inside, he encountered a surprise: blue slimes. These creatures questioned Ludus, intrigued by how he managed to breach the cave's boundaries, which they had meticulously set up to conceal the entrance. In an unexpected turn, Ludus realized that the blue slimes possessed an understanding of human languages, prompting him to attempt negotiations. Much to Ludus's surprise, one of the slimes conveyed that it had no intention of harming him. The slime introduced itself as Ludus's servant. Initially, Ludus didn't take much notice, but gradually, he recognized that he was the individual the slime referred to. When Ludus acknowledged his name, the slime vehemently disagreed, insisting that its master had perished and Ludus was not its true master. Ludus, aware that convincing the slime might be challenging, decided to employ his memory manipulation magic to help the slime recall forgotten events. He saw this as an opportunity to impart his thoughts and memories directly to the slime. Through this method, the slime gradually remembered Ludus as its rightful master. This reconciliation brought a sense of satisfaction to Ludus, finally establishing their bond again. The slime began recounting past events, revealing to Ludus the circumstances surrounding their current situation. After the slime shared his past experiences and struggles with Ludus, they decided to talk about why Ludus came to the cave in the first place, which was evidence that he could get rid of magic beasts. So it seemed like the slime wanted to help him. As per the slime's suggestion, Ludus separated a portion of its body, knowing that the slime could regenerate swiftly. Using his healing magic, Ludus restored the slime to its original state. With this task accomplished, Ludus contemplated returning to the guild to fulfill his aspirations of becoming an adventurer. However, he noticed a change in the slime's demeanor, sensing a hint of melancholy. Curious about the slime's sudden mood shift, Ludus inquired about its well-being. To his surprise, the slime pleaded with Ludus, expressing a strong desire to once again serve him as a loyal companion. However, Ludus hesitated, recognizing the potential pitfalls of their previous relationship dynamic. He cautioned the slime, explaining that being in a servant-master relationship might lead to neglect once more, advising against pursuing that path for their mutual well-being. In the midst of their conversation, Rune, the slime, conveyed a deep-seated belief that Ludus hadn't abandoned them in the past. Rune perceived the circumstances Ludus faced during that time, fostering an understanding that led it to continue desiring to serve Ludus once again. Despite Ludus's reservations, Rune held firm in his conviction that their bond was not served by abandonment, but rather a mutual comprehension of the challenges faced. Ludus found himself torn. While he empathized with Rune's sentiments and harbored an inclination not to part ways, he remained cautious about reinstating the servant-master dynamic. Ludus then cast some magic on Oi. In no time, Rune was recognized as his demonic servant again and swore loyalty to him. Therefore, they planned to support each other henceforth. As Ludus and Rune embarked on their journey back to the guild, Ludus expressed his concern to Rune about the potential risks associated with bringing a magical beast into the city. To mitigate the potential complications, they decided to utilize a unique ability inherent to slimes: disguise magic. This particular skill allowed them to cloak themselves or any object they could perceive, albeit for a brief duration. Rune's mastery over disguise magic meant that its transformations were incredibly refined, almost flawless in mimicking the appearance, body composition, skin texture, and even the softness of the entity it disguised itself as. With this remarkable skill at their disposal, Rune and Ludus hoped to navigate the city without drawing undue attention or causing any disturbance due to Rune's proper form as a magical beast. In their haste to proceed without attracting unwanted attention, Ludus proposed that Rune take on the guise of Cecile, a former classmate from Ludus's previous life at the Magic Academy. Cecile, the daughter of the esteemed Grand Duke Eltoria, was renowned for her status as an elite mage and was known for her remarkable beauty. Throughout Ludus's past life, Cecile had garnered numerous proposals from various men within the Empire, including Ludus himself, who harbored a secret admiration for her. However, Rune's primary concern lay in assuming the form of an ordinary individual rather than embodying the persona of a prominent figure like Cecile. They prioritized maintaining a low profile and blending in seamlessly with the populace. As they hurried on their way, Rune hesitated to adopt the identity of someone as distinguished as Cecile, emphasizing the need to stay inconspicuous while navigating the city's streets. Their journey took an unexpected turn when they stumbled upon a scene of chaos. A carriage under attack by goblins outnumbered the guards by a significant margin. Rune expressed her eagerness to intervene, but sought Ludus's approval before taking action. Aware of the potential attention drawn towards them, Ludus was cautious about standing out in the scenario. However, he couldn't simply ignore the distressing situation unfolding before them. In a bid to maintain a lower profile, Ludus requested Rune's assistance from a distance, urging her to provide support by channeling her magical powers to aid him discreetly from behind the scenes. Employing his magical prowess, Ludus initially used a spell to contend with the spear-wielding goblins, swiftly followed by employing the Thunder Whip to confront those wielding bows. Despite his prolonged effort in the skirmish, the goblins showed no signs of relenting, prompting Ludus to contemplate using fireball magic to vanquish them. However, before he could execute his plan, the goblins, unexpectedly conversing in the Empire's language, made a sudden decision to retreat. Amidst the commotion, Ludus's attention was torn between observing the goblins' behavior and attending to a pressing matter: the guards who had been escorting a princess. The goblin attack had left the princess unconscious, demanding Ludus's immediate attention and diverting his focus from the peculiar turn of events with the goblins speaking the Empire's language. He, however, went there to help diagnose the princess's condition. So he learned that the princess' unconsciousness was indeed due to poison on the goblin's arrow. In a dire turn of events, Ludus discerned that the princess had fallen victim to a fast-spreading poison curse, necessitating immediate medical intervention. Time was of the essence, and Ludus estimated that the princess had a mere 5 minutes before succumbing to the effects of the curse. The urgency to find a remedy was paramount. Their situation grew more challenging as they discovered the carriage was in disrepair from the goblin attack. At the same time, the horses they relied on had fled in the chaos. Despite the availability of horses, the journey to the city to save the princess would still take longer than the remaining time. It seemed impossible to reach help in time to save her life, unless Ludus resorted to utilizing advanced magic purification. Nonetheless, in the face of the imminent danger to the princess's life, Ludus contemplated utilizing this powerful but perilous magic to attempt to save her. In the Empire, accessing advanced purification magic required attaining the Sage class, a high level of mastery that Ludus hadn't yet achieved. Moreover, it was rumored that humans, regardless of their status, couldn't harness this specific magic, as it involved intricate detoxification and algorithmic applications. With a heavy heart, he disclosed to those present that he would perform a magical intervention to provide the princess with temporary first aid, emphasizing that he couldn't stand idly by and watch her perish. In a tense moment, Ludus summoned all his skill and channeled the advanced purification magic, temporarily reviving the princess. Advising the guards to hasten back to the city for further medical attention, Ludus chose to downplay his involvement, urging them to seek a proper diagnosis from a doctor. This way, he hoped to avoid drawing undue attention to himself. Meanwhile, as the princess regained consciousness, she sensed the effects of the purification magic that had revived her. Astounded by the miraculous recovery, she pondered over the identity of the individual capable of wielding such powerful magic. Her thoughts dwelled on the enigmatic savior who had, against all odds, granted her a second chance at life. Having accompanied the guards and the princess back to Urban City, Ludus ensured they safely reached the doctor's care. Stealthily departing the scene after confirming the successful treatment of the poison, and noting that the wound required no further concern, Ludus felt a sense of relief, believing that the princess was on the path to recovery. Rune's return caught Ludus by surprise as she addressed him once more as her master. Despite Ludus's disappointment about having to deceive the guards by presenting himself as a mere farmer, Rune swiftly apologized for her earlier departure. They went to the guild, where they asked the lady who was the receptionist to register them as adventurers as they presented their application forms and also a body part of a monster that they defeated. The lady then decided to check the results, and they forged the application form. Ludus, anticipating the receptionist's possible disappointment due to defeating what he considered a relatively weak monster, the blue slime, rushed to apologize, assuming she might find it underwhelming. She wasn't about to criticize Ludus for defeating a blue slime, but was impressed by his feat. Contrary to Ludus's assumption that blue slimes were standard and weak, she clarified that they were actually quite rare in that area. This unforeseen event led to Ludus and Rune officially being recognized as adventurers, marking the beginning of their new journey. Later that afternoon, they underwent a comprehensive orientation session about the life and responsibilities of adventurers. Additionally, they were educated about their duties, emphasizing the importance of cooperating in monster extermination efforts to maintain the safety of the region. This guidance and information gave them a solid understanding of the expectations and rewards of their new role as adventurers, preparing them for the challenges and tasks ahead in their new career path. The prospect of an aptitude test for different adventurer classes prompted Ludus to retire early for some much-needed rest, realizing it had been a while since his last intense battle. Sensing Ludus's fatigue, Rune, in her human form, endeavored to help him relax before reverting to her slime form. Unbeknownst to Ludus, for Rune, this reunion marked over 1,000 years since Ludus's reincarnation. He reminded her of the effects disguise had on reducing her magical potency. He urged her to be mindful of controlling her powers during the assessment. Ludus emphasized the necessity of maintaining control significantly since her abilities had been affected by the disguise magic she employed to transform into a human form. Recognizing the need for Rune to be adequately equipped for their adventuring endeavors, Ludus resolved to procure armor and weapons for her. They planned to challenge new things together, even though there were still lots of things Ludus had to think about, as the first thing was his immediate goal. They can set up a base by earning money as an adventurer for the time being, and after that, they can meet up with their other servants as they explore places. The next day, they both went to meet with Nor, the lady in charge of their aptitude test, who welcomed them. Her class was a mage, and so she will be responsible for their tests. As a novice adventurer wielding high-tier magic, he realized it could attract undue attention, prompting him to exercise restraint during the test. With this in mind, he planned to demonstrate his abilities using essential magic and intentionally limit its power to avoid standing out. During the initial round of the test focused on healing magic, Nor, one of the evaluators, requested Ludus to demonstrate magic power replenishment through magic power regeneration, a more advanced technique. Despite being the most minor basic form of magic, Ludus promptly complied. To Nor's surprise, Ludus executed the technique effortlessly, performing the magic without the need for incantations. This seamless display of advanced magic without chanting caught Nor off guard, as it was an unorthodox approach unfamiliar to Ludus himself. The revelation about the magicians of the former empire being capable of casting magic without incantations resonated with Rune. It led her to surmise that Ludus might be among the descendants of that empire, individuals bestowed with this unique ability. As the test proceeded to the next round, focusing on offensive magic, Nor instructed Ludus to showcase his abilities. Ludus sought clarification from Nor about using a fireball to prevent further suspicion and adhere to caution. Upon receiving approval, Nor directed Ludus to target a specific silhouette as part of the evaluation. Aware of the need to maintain discretion, Ludus was carefully prepared to demonstrate his offensive magic skills while keeping a low profile. Ludus's demonstration of the fireball spell showcased an impressive level of proficiency. However, to Nor's surprise, the fire lingered longer than anticipated, leaving her astounded by its sustained intensity. Ludus himself understood that the fireball he conjured was an upgraded version designed for military use. It couldn't be extinguished quickly with his current magic strength. Nor, frustrated by the unexpected turn of events, became angry and ordered other magicians to be summoned to assist. However, Ludus held the realization that even with additional assistance, their attempts to extinguish the intensified fireball might prove futile. Despite acknowledging Nor's competence, Ludus recognized the challenge ahead in finding someone capable of extinguishing the advanced fireball spell he had conjured. Nor's attempt to extinguish the intensified fireball proved challenging, and despite her efforts, she struggled to put out the flames. It was only when Ludus discreetly joined forces with her that they successfully managed to quell the fireball. However, Nor was unaware of Ludus's assistance, attributing the success solely to her own efforts. Grateful for Ludus's discreet aid, Nor pledged to facilitate his advancement by elevating his rank by 1 level, ensuring his eligibility to register as a magician. Ludus expressed his gratitude to Nor for her support and the opportunity to officially join the ranks of magicians within the guild, appreciative of her recognition of his capabilities. The next day, Rune and Ludus began their life as adventurers. They came to the notice they only had Goblin skirmish, which made Ludus remember the princess he saved the other day from the hands of the goblins. While they were standing and looking at the quest passed on the wall, Eris, a hunter-class adventurer, came around that time. She could see that they were still new, so she addressed them as potential newcomers. Moreover, she came there because she was curious to know the person who was promoted to magician class, as rumors had already spread about it. The goblins were planning to raid the cities, and the quest had been completed because the Lord did not agree to pay more than usual if more people had completed the quests quickly. Adventurers did not want to go for that quest because they would earn low bounties, as 1 del is equal to a full cup of beer, so each goblin slain will earn an adventurer 1 del. Since Rune and Ludus are new adventurers, they cannot be only about requests. Therefore, Ludus considered them going for the Goblin skirmish, their first mission. For their first mission, they headed north of Elpin for the Goblin skirmish. Rune felt happy to be in armor, so she asked Ludus how she looked in it. Still, Ludus lowered new expectations because it is a second-hand item that the military no longer needed. Ludus later changed the subject of their conversation, as he asked Rune if she had any clue about the goblins who were speaking the Empire's language. She said that it is not rare and does not mean they are descendants. There were actually goblins among Ludi's servants. If only a reasonable goblin, like one of his servants, was there, they could have just asked them to leave Urban before they started attacking. They eventually reached where the goblins were, and so the goblins looked focused on them. Ludus thought of negotiating with them, but the goblins did not look the way he would feel convinced to leave them, and he began fighting them without any further delay, to the extent that he accidentally killed them. By that, he was able to detect that his pragmatic skill was truly as pathetic as he thought it would be. The goblins were angry with their last breath as they died. However, no matter how many classes take place, goblins still remain goblins. For them, humans are considered food and nothing else. Since negotiation is impossible, he first asks Rune if she is okay unless he talks to their leader. Rune was actually fine, even if she felt delighted that she did what her master complimented her. But there was a particular goblin that was still alive, and that way he apologized to Ludus to forgive him, as it called a name called Master Bates. Ludus looked confused as he heard that. Whereas Bates used to be one of Ludus's servants back then, he is a freak who pledged servitude to Ludus because of his desire to research magic. So, Ludus thought that there was no way Bates could still be alive because humans and goblins' lifespans were not much different. When the results came out, the receptionist commended them on their excellent job. Eris was there then, surprised that Ludus and Rune could still do a great job. Eris then asked if they could give them a tip on how they were able to defeat that large number of goblins, so they lied back to her. She somehow detected that it was not possible for them to lure goblins into a trap because they were not so dumb. Later, the focus was diverted from that discussion, and they decided to celebrate their first successful mission by hosting a feast whereby Ludus and Rune were asked to dictate their desired meal. Ludus was very happy with the opportunity, as he could now choose the meal he wanted, unlike when he was even an emperor. After Ludus and Rune finished their first mission and became official adventurers, Ludus took on the Goblin skirmish with his seniors, Eris and Castle. Eris told Castle to attack a goblin, and while he was doing that, another one sneaked up on him from behind. Ludus tried to warn Castle about the goblin behind him, but he was too distracted. The goblin was about to attack him with a rod, but one of the adventurers called Nor came to Castle's rescue by using her fireball to attack the goblin. Ludus took part in the Goblin skirmish not because of the reward, but rather to examine during the aptitude test, so he had come to witness Nor's magic. Nor had reached Orichalcum, the highest adventurer's rank, which means Ludus can understand more about the era by observing Nor's magic. Ludus saw that the magic standard of their era had lowered significantly. None of the three adventurers could use detection magic, and Nor still can't cast middle-tier magic, let alone a high-tier one. A single middle-tier magic could easily wipe out 5 goblins, but Nor could still cast a wide range of spells, so Ludus felt she was surely full of potential. While Ludus was staring at Nor, Eris came to him and told him to keep looking at Nor. Ludus tried to tell Eris that it was not like that, and it was because he thought Nor was cool, but Eris misunderstood him, thinking that was why Ludus decided to be a magician, and she told him to leave it up to her as his big sister. Eris dragged Castle away under the guise of business and told the Ludus and Nor to meet them at the guild. She told Ludus before that she would create a private room for him and Nor, so he should try to learn as much as possible and observe. Ludus knew Eris misunderstood his intentions, but he turned to Nor and asked her to accompany him. As they walked along, Ludus thought about how to start a conversation, and he decided to start by asking her how to get better at magic. But he held back his question when they came across a statue of a man on a horse along the road. Ludus asked Nor who the statue man was, and she told him it was a statue of Ludus. Ludus was surprised that he shared a name with the statue man, and he asked what the man's job was. Nor explained that the statue man was the final emperor, whose full name was Ludus Vin Arx Thoth Lick West Sakosh Clutch. Ludus was surprised at the lengthy and grandiose name, and when he muttered it to himself, he realized that it was his name, but he still felt like it could be a coincidence. When Nor mentioned that the statue Ludus was the 66th emperor, Ludus became certain that it was truly him. Nor told Ludus that legend has it that Emperor Ludus mastered all forms of magic. He emerged victorious in every battle and put an end to wicked forces. He also goes to war to save those suffering from it. Hence, his title, the Holy Emperor, which is why they had a statue of him to pay their respect. Nor continued that the person who built the model for the statue was said to be the emperor's killer. He despised and exacted revenge on the emperor for not protecting his homeland. After the emperor's death, people came to understand his rightful policy that he had dedicated his life to the empire as a leader. Therefore, during the 500 years until the empire's downfall, people built the statue to pay him respect. Ludus felt fulfilled that his actions were later justified, and Nor continued that after the emperor's downfall, the world was completely wrecked, and Ludus became a god. People prayed for the return of Holy Emperor Ludus, and his statue was a symbol of it. Ludus realized that no matter how wrecked the world was, they only wished for human restoration. Nor told him it wasn't possible anymore, but it would be great if Emperor Ludus purged the world of all evil. However, Ludus knew that he would no longer be the emperor even if what they wished for happened. Ludus returned home, and Rune and the other slimes welcomed him back happily. With their combined income, they hired an inn's room long-term and summoned additional chibi slimes from the cave. Rune informed Ludus that the slimes had mastered basic knowledge while he was away. They had studied beginner West's language using communication magic, and they could also cast a camouflage spell to disguise themselves as humans during the day. Ludus thanked Rune for helping him because his magic strength was boosted as they became his servants. Rune asked Ludus to use his reminiscence power to choose any figure he wanted so that the slimes would cast camouflage to imitate them. Ludus decided it was best to pick someone from his previous life, and while he was thinking about who to pick, Rune told him to pick his type, a gentle girl with blue hair like crystal clear waters named Celine. She was his classmate at Magic Academy. Ludus tried to argue that she wasn't his type, but it was too late, and one of the slimes transformed into Celine. He decided to name her Marina, and she thanked him. Eris came into the room and called Ludus and Rune to come to the guild at once. Ludus wondered if something was wrong because Eris looked different. As Ludus got to the guild, he saw a lot of adventurers gathered, and he wondered what was happening. The leader announced that he had an order for everyone from the Elpin Grand Duke. The northern sentry towers reported the Goblin army marching toward Elpin, and the Duke's order was for them to ambush the Goblin army and make a preemptive strike outside the city. The leader told the adventurers to prepare themselves because they would join the front line. Ludus wondered what the Duke was thinking, because the strategy made no sense, and they only cared about the preemptive strike, not the fortified wall. At the front line of the battle, about 1,000 goblins were facing 600 Elpin soldiers. Ludus asked Rune what she thought about it, and she told him that the formation was disrupted because the cavalry on their side was advancing too far. And as for the goblins, they remained pretty stable despite their lack of competency. Ludus knew that everything Rune said was true because a small mistake could lead to a disaster, and the chivalry was advancing too far because they looked down on goblins. A girl that Ludus recognized as the princess stepped forward and asked the Elpin soldiers to back down because the goblins were using the Empire formation, and they were planning a direct attack to wreak havoc on their center. Ludus realized that there was someone who knew about the Empire formation well. The princess asked the soldiers to call their leader, but they told her that he was in a brothel and she ordered them to go there. As Ludus stared at the princess, Eris told him she was Princess Yuria, the noble and beautiful 17th princess of the kingdom. Eris told Ludus to stay focused because the battle had started, and as he looked forward, he saw that the goblins' formation was collapsing despite their significant casualties, which meant that they could emerge victorious if they continued like that. Ludus remembered the goblin that mentioned Master Bates while dying, and he concluded that their leader was not the Bates he knew, because if it were him, things wouldn't be so straightforward. Suddenly, a mighty wind blew fire about, and it halted the battle as everyone stood wondering what was happening. Nor informed the adventurers that it was the end for them because that was the legendary firestorm spell, and even 1,000 soldiers could not stand a chance against such a spell. Ludus realized that the firestorm spell belonged to high-tier magic, and someone on the goblin side could use the spell. Ludus secretly cast a tranquility spell on Nor, so she could fall asleep because he didn't want other adventurers to feel anxious and horrified. He called Rune and ordered her to call Marina and the other slimes so they would engage in the battle. The Elpin soldiers fell to the ground in pain because of the firestorm spell, and the goblins smiled wickedly at them. Ludus decided that Rune and the other slimes would disguise as robes and then invisibility so they could reach the enemy's base, but their magic power was gradually depleting. Ludus knew that Bates was the only goblin capable of using high-tier magic, so he was definitely behind everything. He was determined to convince Bates to stop the battle. Ludus finally made it to the goblin's side and took off his robe. Immediately, the goblins saw that Ludus was human. They surrounded him, and he saw Bates in a robe. Ludus saw that he gave the robe that Bates had on, and he stepped closer to him. He asked Bates if he knew who he was and said he came to talk to him. Ludus introduced himself to Bates as the emperor he once served, but he saw that Bates didn't believe him, so he decided to use his ultimate thunderbolt spell on the goblins that tried to attack him. The sky darkened, and the force threw the goblins away from Ludus. Bates wondered what kind of human Ludus was, and Ludus realized that they did not know the thunderbolt spell he used. Ludus asked if he was indeed Bates, and he told Ludus that he was Bates the 18th. Bates couldn't believe that their progenitor, Bates the First, had served a pathetic human like the Emperor. Ludus realized that the goblins were Bates the First's descendants, and one of them, Bates the 18th, inherited the Bates title, which explains why they could speak the Empire's language. Ludus asked Bates if he learned the firestorm magic from his predecessor, and Bates asked Ludus how he knew about the magic. Ludus remembered how Bates the First came to him before to learn high-tier magic, and also to ask for his permission to consult his research, which would allow other goblins, even those with low magic power, to use high-tier magic. And that was his dream. Ludus laughed as he saw that Bates's dream was coming to pass through his descendants, and Bates the 18th looked at him with disgust and asked him why he was laughing. He told Ludus that he wasn't scared of his thunderbolt magic and threatened him that he still had high-tier magic up his sleeves. Ludus told Bates that he was in a good mood, so he would present him with an offer. He asked Bates to become his servant and stop the war. If he regretted what he had done, then he would teach him the magic and knowledge he possessed. Bates refused to listen to Ludus and ordered the other goblins to kill him. He used his firestorm power on Ludus, but Ludus turned the firestorm back on him. Ludus saw that Bates was nowhere near Bates at first because he didn't know about magic reflection. The firestorm burnt the goblins down with Bates, but Rune told Ludus that the fire was spreading, so he decided to extinguish the fire with his aquatic splash magic. Eris was wondering what they were supposed to do against the high-tier firestorm magic when she looked at the fire with Nor and saw the fire cooling down. Nor couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the high-tier aquatic splash magic at work because she knew that it meant that Emperor Ludus had returned. After Ludus was done at the goblin's side, he decided to go back, but he was sad that nothing had changed as goblins and humans still hated each other. As he was going back, one of the goblins that survived moved close to him and begged him to wait for him. The goblin, Loist, begs Ludus to allow him to become his servant and says that he is ready to pledge his loyalty to him to study magic. Ludus accepted Loist, and he thought about how Bates the First wasn't the only progressive-minded goblin. As Ludus defeated Bates, the goblin formation fell apart, and he accepted Loist's request to become his servant. He also used invisibility and presence concealment while returning to Elpin, and they all celebrated their win over drinks. Castle told Ludus to drink as much as he wanted, and Eris told Castle that he would pay for Ludus and Rune's ration. Ludus asked them where Nor was, and he was told that she wanted some fresh air, so she must be in the square. Eris explained that Nor was stunned after seeing the enemy's magic, so he should wait till she had calmed down. But Rune spoke up that Nor appeared to be in terror of something else, and she told them that she would teach them since they didn't understand. Ludus realized that Rune was drunk because she kept talking about how Master Ludus was capable of casting the firestorm spell effortlessly. Ludus quickly took Rune away from the rest of the room so she could sleep. Marina also asked Ludus to take a rest, and she apologized for the Bates incident. Ludus informed Marina that Loist had become his servant, and he also promised to convince other goblins to serve him. Still, there was the issue of accommodation because as the number of his servants increased, so did the demand for accommodation. The goblins would need a remote accommodation, so he needed an ideal location for it. Marina asked Ludus to call it a day and take a rest, and he agreed because he was exhausted. He decided to sleep close to Rune, since her camouflage effect would wear off when she woke up. Later that night, as Ludus was sleeping, he felt warmth and softness in his body, and it was like his chest was being pressured. He opened his eyes to see Rune sleeping very close to his body, and he stood up immediately to get dressed and asked Rune to get dressed too. Ludus saw some guards in front of his room, and when he went to meet them, he saw that they were defense troops. He asked what brought them to his house, but they told him to stop talking and follow them. As one of the guards dragged him, Rune wanted to attack him, But Ludus asked her to stop and get back because he didn't do anything wrong to be interrogated. Ludus knew he could get away easily, but he followed them just to see what would happen. The guards took him to a castle. While he was admiring it, a guy stepped forward and apologized to Ludus for bothering him. The guy talked about how the princess would be delighted to see Ludus, and Ludus felt like he recognized the voice that was speaking to him. The guy introduced himself as Rostin and told Ludus that they had a hard time because he went away the last time without revealing his name. Ludus realized Rostin was the princess's escort, and Rostin apologized for the inconvenience. He told Ludus that the princess wanted to invite him politely, but they were short of people, so they had to ask for Elpenlord's soldiers. Rostin took Ludus to the princess and announced to her that Ludus was around. As Ludus faced the princess, he thought back to when he had seen her in the walls the day before, and he knew she was gorgeous. After Ludus introduced himself to her again, she moved closer to him and asked him how he had healed her the other time. Ludus realized that she summoned him not just to show her gratitude, he decided to outwit her. Ludus told her that he used a hereditary magic called Purge, which can remove many kinds of poisons, but the princess still felt that it was high-tier magic. Ludus told her that he didn't know what she was talking about, and she thanked him for his timely arrival. She also asked him if there was anyone else in his village capable of using the magic he used on her, but he told her that none of his villagers knew about it. The princess still insisted on knowing more about the magic, but Ludus told her that it was in a Gilmore, and he burned it. The princess couldn't believe that Ludus could burn such an important item, and she asked him if he could teach her the purge. Ludus tried to convince Princess with different excuses why he couldn't teach her, but she took off her glove and showed him the king's seal on her hand, which was passed from royal generations to generations. Ludus realized that her seal looked like an emperor's seal, with a 5-pointed star like his own. The princess confirmed that the seal was indeed a 5-pointed seal, similar to that of Holy Emperor Ludus, but she couldn't utilize the seal, so it was useless. She talked about how her older brothers were able to form pacts effortlessly with chosen servants, but she couldn't do it. So since then, she was made fun of, and that was why she tried her best to find a solution by studying magic. Ludus knew that the 5-pointed seal only enabled forming pacts with monsters and was ineffective when used on humans, but he couldn't tell the princess about it yet. The princess wanted to learn the purge magic so she could be a bit more helpful to the kingdom, so she asked Ludus to be her servant. She offered to pay him 50 del per month, but Ludus told her that he could earn that amount in a single day as an adventurer. The princess was shocked at this, and she asked Rostin if it was true. Ludus knew that no matter how much he was paid, he would always avoid becoming a princess's servant because he had sacrificed a lot for his freedom, and he knew the dangers of getting involved and stuck in a power struggle. He asked Princess if she had ever thought of how her life would be if she didn't have the king's seal. But Princess told him that her fate as a seal bearer was inevitable as she was born in the royal family, and she didn't despise the seal because of its resemblance to that of Holy Emperor Ludus. The princess told Ludus that it was her dream to become a great person like Emperor Ludus, and Ludus told her that he would collect 2 del per day to become her mentor, not her servant, until she mastered the purge spell. Ludus saw that the princess was very strong-willed, and he felt she wouldn't use magic to do bad stuff. When Ludus got home, Marina told him that she wanted to become an adventurer because she wanted to be helpful to him like Rune. Rune argued that Marina would only cause trouble instead of being helpful due to her lack of interaction with humans, but Marina insisted that she could be of help to Ludus. Ludus told Rune to take it easy, and he asked Marina to come with him and try to defeat monsters to prove her capability of becoming an adventurer since he was going out to collect some herbs. Marina thanked Ludus, and they all went together. In the forest, Ludus showed Marina some look-alike herbs that were medicinal and poisonous, and he also taught her how to recognize them. While Marina went about the forest, Rune told Ludus that they should bring Marina back, but he told her that they should leave her to get her own experience to gain more knowledge because failure was an inevitable part of learning. He reminded Rune that she had also failed a lot before, and while they were talking, Marina mistakenly stepped on a trap and suddenly got bound by vines. As Ludus and Rune ran to save Marina, she started laughing and she talked about how it was fun. Ludus was surprised at Marina's reaction, and he wondered how she could laugh in her situation, but he concluded that it wasn't bad to be optimistic, and he asked Rune to use a fireball to burn the vines, but leave the flower's nectar intact, because they can sell it for a high price. Rune used her fireball power to burn the vines, and immediately Marina was free. She chastised her for not being careful, but Ludus told Rune to take it easy on her since he was also careless too. Ludus saw some magic ore essence from the last strike, and he was happy because they could make a fortune from it. He told Rune that they wouldn't have found the essence but for Marina's mistake, so she should be recognized for her accidental contribution. Rune told Marina not to cause any trouble for Ludus, and that she should try to memorize the magic they used. Ludus also offered to teach her some combat skills, but Rune told Ludus that she was enough in terms of combat capability, and she asked Ludus who he liked most between Marina and her. Ludus asked Rune what was wrong with her, and she told him nothing, but he saw that she wasn't in a good mood. Ludus thought about how he couldn't forgive any servants, just like she does to Rune, so that he wouldn't earn another wave of hatred and grudge. A man was being chased by a black monster in the forest, and the monster suddenly stopped when it perceived a familiar scent. Nor was telling the adventurers about the monster called Black Shadow. She told them that according to the rumor, the Black Shadow monster dashes with incredible speed and attacks people at night, but all they can see is a black shadow with glowing red eyes. Ludus noticed that Nor looked better because she used to be in a worse mood after the Goblin's raid, but now she was more enthusiastic about taking on requests. Nor told them that the bounty on the Black Shadow was 500 del, and Ludus wanted to take on the request with Eris's group because he needed money for servants' accommodations, food, and materials. He told Rune that they would take on the request so he could settle their accommodation problem, and she gladly accepted. Their excitement was cut short when they found out that only gold-ranked or above adventurers were eligible for the request, and they were bronze-ranked, so they could not take on the request. Rune looked sad, but Ludus assured her that Nor's group had an Orichalcum-ranked adventurer, so the skirmish would have ended, and things would be fine. Ludus asked Rune if she was worried about Nor's group, but she quickly stood up to defend herself and told him that he was the only one she would think about. Ludus still had a bad feeling about the skirmish because he wondered what the monster was after, given that it was a middle-tier magic caster or a monster. Ludus later concluded that the monster's aim might be to lure adventurers and knights into a trap, so he told Rune that they would be after the request too. He asked her to call other marinas and she agreed. Ludus knew that even though he wouldn't receive a bounty, he still had to get a grasp of the current situation to avoid later issues. Nor and her group were still searching around the forest, but they had not seen any sign of the monster. Ludus noticed this and decided to expand his search radius since the monster wasn't in the vicinity of the open area. He followed the main road to the north and asked Rune to stop her camouflage. Rune appeared beside him not long after, and as they kept going, Ludus stopped and asked the monster to show its true form since there was no human around anymore. The Black Shadow monster appeared, and Ludus was shocked as he saw that the monster was Avel. Avel told Rune that it had been a while, and he had come because he sensed a familiar scent, only to see that she had chosen to live with humans. Rune told Avel that it had been 900 years, but he came just in time. She explained that Master Ludus had reincarnated, and he was still the emperor they once served. Ludus also explained to Avel that he had reincarnated, and he apologized for betraying Avel's loyalty as his servant, but Avel tried to attack Ludus instead of listening to him. Rune quickly put up a magic barrier to protect Ludus, and Avel angrily spoke that Master Ludus was dead. He was angry because of how Rune trusted Ludus, and he wanted to burn them both to ashes. Rune asked Ludus to cast Reminiscence to Avel, and he tried sending his memories to Avel through Reminiscence, but Avel still attacked him. Avel told Ludus that the emperor to whom he swore loyalty died once, but he would kill him one more time. Rune tried to stop Avel, but Ludus pushed her out of the way and smiled at Avel. As Avel went close to Ludus, he told him that he couldn't kill him, and Ludus also told Avel that he was delighted to see him alive. Avel wept in Ludus' embrace because he was happy at what Ludus said to him. Ludus accepted Avel as his servant again, and Avel told him that it was his honor, but Rune was angry at Avel for almost burning them into ashes. Avel told Rune not to worry because he wasn't there to replace her as Ludus' maid. He explained that he was leading a migration for a few humans residing in his area, and he planned to find new accommodations for them. Ludus was happy that Avel didn't harm or kill any human, and Avel apologized for his rudeness. Rune told Avel about how Ludus had collected many servants, but because of that, he was looking for accommodation. Avel told them that he knew some ideal places because he was also looking for new accommodation, so they should wait while he inspected those locations. Rune thanked Avel, and Ludus asked him if he had any idea about the whereabouts of the other servants. Avel told Ludus that Vandal the orc passed away due to old age, and he saw Arlong 500 years ago, but he should still be fine because he was a vampire. Ludus was sad that Vandal had passed away, but he knew that he couldn't reunite with all of them. Avel asked Ludus if he knew where Gillis was, and Ludus told him he didn't know. But Avel told Ludus that they had to prioritize looking for Gillis because he was the holder of his sword. Ludus remembered that he passed his sword to Avel, and he asked Avel why he wanted them to find the sword. Avel explained that he had a bad feeling about it because humans and monsters had been behaving like they were in chaos, so they had to take precautions. When Ludus was the emperor, he had a special sword that carried magical ore attributes because to forge magical weapons, they needed magic ore, but now, he didn't think he truly needed the sword. Ludus thought about the Goblin invasion, and he felt he needed to look for his sword again because of it. In the princess's castle, the princess told Ludus that she wanted to find the Holy Emperor Ludus's sword, and that she came to open it because of the sword in the first place. Ludus feigned ignorance and asked her more questions about the sword, but what stood out to him was when the princess told him that Ludus was a sword master. Ludus knew that he sucked at swordsmanship, and he wondered how he could have such a far-fetched legend. Ludus asked the princess why she wanted the sword, and she told him it was for magic power, so she would be able to cast high-tier spells. Ludus knew that the princess was a fast learner, and if she had the sword, high-tier power would be no problem for her. But he saw that she looked exhausted and decided to tell her the truth. Ludus asked the princess if she was sure that the sword was an elpin, because it was a myth from 1,000 years ago. But the princess argued that there was no way it was a lie, and she talked about the history of the sword. The princess told Ludus that she left her request at the guild, which promised whoever accepted it huge rewards. At the guild, adventurers gathered at the board and saw the princess's request to look for the emperor's sword, which had a reward of 30 del. The adventurers felt that the princess was mean because the reward was small. Cassell asked if anybody knew what the sword looked like and if the capital city of the empire was far away from the guild, because that was where they were to go to look for the sword. Ludus felt it was just him and Yuria who acknowledged the existence of the sword, but Nor came to meet them and explained that the sword was in Elpin and not in the capital city of the empire. Cassell told them he would pass on the request because 30 del was too small, and he asked Ludus if he would take the request. Ludus later went on with the search for his sword with Rune, but they went to look for Gillis first. Rune asked Ludus if it was okay to meet Gillis again with the clothes she had on because she was scared of them fighting each other, just like Avel. Ludus assured Rune that it was fine because he knew that Gillis would never resort to violence. He thought about how he had met Gillis and how Gillis hadn't resisted or resorted to violence, even when he had been attacked, just to protect his rabbit friends. That was the reason why he gave Gillis his sword. Gillis needs a large amount of food because of his gigantic size, so eating fruits is not a good idea for him. But he insists on never hurting or killing others, so Ludus chooses him to be his servant. They got to the ruin Eris mentioned, and Ludus saw that it was quite huge that even Gillis could enter, so it was an ideal place for his sword to be hidden. Ludus decided to use presence detection for better safety, even though there seemed to be no human around. Ludus sensed that Nor was around, and he asked Rune to use camouflage to disguise as a robe and then use invisibility. Rune hugged Ludus to make it easier for her to assume the disguise, and when Ludus got to a rocky part that looked like the remnants of an explosion, he saw some adventurers running from a monster, but he realized that Nor was left behind. Ludus asked Rune to remove her camouflage and light the way with lit spell, and they made their way inside. Ludus found Nor alive, but she had fainted on the floor. He asked Rune to get her out of there, but the monster appeared before Rune could do as he asked. Ludus saw that the monster was Gillis, and he tried to tell him that he was Master Ludus. But when he moved closer to Gillis, he saw that he had turned into a skeleton. Gillis used an immortalization spell on himself just to protect Ludus's sword, and he couldn't go back to his original form anymore. Ludus was very sad, because he knew everything happened because of him, and there was no option but to put Gillis down for good. As Ludus put Gillis down, he broke down in tears as he apologized to Gillis over and over again because he felt guilty for what had happened to his servant. Nor woke up among her party members, and she was surprised to see them since she went on the request with new party members. But Eris told her that the people forming the new party with her called for reinforcements. Nor remembered that they were attacked by a skeleton. And when she saw Master Ludus's sword, it looked just like an ordinary sword. But Eris told her that they had to return to the city as soon as possible, since she had depleted most of her magic powers. When they left, Ludus was relieved that they hadn't found out that the sword was fake, and the entrance was blocked already, so maybe nobody would go there anymore. Rune saw that Ludus was moody, so she asked him what was wrong. Ludus told her he felt like he needed to adjust his life because he was now interested in his servants' lives, and Rune told him that she would join him as well. Nor gave the princess the fake sword that Ludus had planted, but he already made it possible for the sword to store a large amount of mana and give the mana to its user. He couldn't just give the princess the sword because Gylus had given up his life for it. When the princess got the fake sword, she told Ludus that she didn't think that Emperor Ludus carried something as pompous as that, but Ludus asked her to cast spells and see. The princess tried casting some spells, and it worked, so she was happy, and Ludus felt relieved that he could trust her to use the sword. He told her that his role had been fulfilled since she could not do some spells, and the princess thanked him for everything. She told him that he was reserved for an adventurer, and he would have no luck with girls at that rate, so she gave him his reward and told him that she was waiting for that time to come. When Ludus got home, he saw that the other slimes had transformed, and they were adjusting to their human forms. The room got dark suddenly, and Oval announced that he was back from his mission as he entered. Oval had found a suitable location to the east of the house. The distance to the location was half a day with Aval's speed, but it was 4 days for humans, which was okay for Ludus. Oval decided to take Ludus there, and Rune told him that she would handle things at home in his absence. As Ludus and Aval went, Oval asked if he was able to find the sword, and if he met Gylus too. Ludus filled Oval in on the things that happened, and he blamed himself for what happened. But Oval told him that they, the servants, were to blame for Gylus's lonely demise because they gave him the sword to keep. Ludus promised Oval that he wouldn't leave him alone again, and Oval told Ludus that he wouldn't even allow it. Ludus decided to take a nap on Oval's back, and he asked Oval to wake him up when they got there. When they got to the place, Ludus liked it because there was a mountain, river, and forest nearby, so they wouldn't have to worry about materials. There was also enough room to build houses and set up farms, but Ludus wondered how a place like that could go untouched. Avel explained that it was the western part of the continent, and it had many uncultivated lands compared to the eastern part. While they were discussing, 18 hellhounds that looked like Oval appeared. Oval introduced them as members of his pack, and they swore loyalty to Ludus and begged him to allow them to serve under his rule. Ludus felt that the hellhounds really trusted Oval since they wanted to serve him, and he introduced himself to them. Ludus told Oval that they had to worry about food first, and Oval asked Ludus what his next course of action was after setting up the base. Ludus told him that he wanted to travel the world and also find some of his old familiars. But he wouldn't act like an emperor anymore because he didn't care about wars and politics. Oval agreed with him, and they came across a village that felt odd to Ludus. He decided to take a look around, and he cast invisibility over them just in case. As he entered the village, he saw the villagers on the ground, but they were still breathing. Ludus wondered what was happening, and he called Oval to ask if the perpetrators could notice them because he didn't expect to see humans other than him using middle-tier magic. The perpetrators heard Ludus's footsteps and turned back, but when they turned, Ludus saw that they were vampires. Ludus asked the two vampires why they attacked the village because they didn't need the blood of so many people to survive, but the vampires laughed and told Ludus that they hunted humans just for fun. Ludus asked them where Arlong was, and they decided to attack him for questioning them. Ludus asked Oval to deal with the vampire on the left, while he would take on the one on his right. They started attacking each other, and Ludus eventually brought them down. He asked them where Arlong was again and told them he would let them go if they told him. The vampires agreed to tell him, but they heard a carriage sound, and Ludus decided to let them go because he didn't want to be seen. He asked them to tell Arlong that Ludus had been reborn, and it was time for vampires to stop killing humans. Ludus and Oval hid themselves, and they saw that the princess and her guards had come to help the villagers. Ludus was glad that the princess was making good use of the sword, and he left with Oval. Arlong was the head of the vampire clan, and he always had contempt for humans, but he only kept it at bay because of the respect he had for Emperor Ludus. And after Ludus's death, his promise not to hurt humans became void. But Ludus felt that once Arlong heard that he was alive, then he wouldn't be able to ignore him. In Ludus's new settlement, they all worked hand in hand. The slimes helped in carrying their food, and Aval's pack acted as their bodyguards. But getting enough food for everyone was still Ludus's problem. Marina wanted armor, but Rune shut her down because it was too expensive for them to buy. Ludus agreed they wouldn't buy it but make it. Ludus measured Marina's body and made her a lovely armor, and Marina was so happy. When Rune saw it, she told Ludus that she also wanted one. But Ludus had already gotten the hang of it, so he told her that he wouldn't need to measure her again. At the guild, there were so many vampire subjugation requests, and the adventurers were scared that some of them even considered running away, but Castle and Eris tried to persuade them to stay and fight. Ludus noticed Nor wasn't at the meeting, so he went to meet her. Ludus asked if she had a history with the vampires because she was acting odd, and Nor confessed that she was scared of vampires because her hometown was destroyed by them. Her parents and friends were all killed, and she was the only survivor because her mother hid her behind Ludus's statue. Ludus stretched his hand towards Nor and asked her to come together with him because vampires may be scary, but they won't let fear stop them. She thanked him, and she hoped Emperor Ludus would help them, but Ludus knew that he had to stop the vampires, even if he had to fight his old servant to death. Eris and other adventurers came up with measures against the vampires, but Ludus decided to seek the vampires out on his own. Aval told Ludus that he had given instructions to his pack to report any sight of vampires and go all the way if they engaged in battle. Marina introduced herself to Aval, and Ludus got a report that a group of vampires was spotted in the north, so he asked Rune and Marina to get on Aval's back. And they went on. They saw the vampires, and Ludus used his magic to bind them with vines. He asked one of them if they told Arlong about him, and also information on vampires in the area, but the vampire refused to answer. The vampire suddenly bit himself and slumped to death along with the other vampires, but Ludus knew that it was an order from someone else like Arlong to prevent information leaks. Ludus decided to look for another group of vampires, but even after a week, there were no sightings of them, and Normancy returned to Elpin. Nor took Ludus to the Elpin library one day because she knew that the vampires had not given up, and they only went to prepare. They talked about what the vampires could be doing, and they came to the conclusion that the vampires had already infiltrated Elpin under the guise of the followers of Ludus' church. Ludus felt that the vampires' plan was to take over their headquarters, and as expected, the pilgrims started entering the Lord's palace. Ludus called his familiars to tell them what he thought about the pilgrims that entered the palace, and Rune came up with a plan to keep the guards busy. Ludus gained access and got close to the pilgrims. Then he used his electrify power and saw that they were indeed vampires. The vampires captured a lord, who gave them Princess Yulia so they could free him. But they took the two of them instead and blindfolded them. The vampires sensed that Ludus was close to them, even though he was wearing a camouflage robe, and they called him out. Ludus asked one of the vampires for his name, and the vampire told him his name was Bayer. Ludus asked Bayer where Arlong was, but he refused to tell him and asked Ludus to reveal himself instead. Ludus revealed himself to see that the vampires were using dark magic to get him, and it was their plan to get him to reveal himself all along. The vampires thought that the dark magic had finished Ludus off, but Ludus appeared and used a dark magic of the highest level called Hell's Call on them. The vampires had never heard of the spell before because Ludus kept it from Arlong. He asked them to tell him everything they knew if they wanted to be free from the darkness, and the three vampires agreed. They told Ludus that nobody had seen Arlong for over 100 years, and he hadn't been given them orders since Ludus's death, so they were only attacking humans because they were food to them, and also because Arlong had a grudge against humans for killing Ludus. Ludus turned the three vampires into his servants and gave them a mission to look for Arlong. Aval asked Ludus why he allowed the untrustworthy vampires to become his servants, but Ludus told him that the vampires had already taken an oath with his mark, which would take their lives if they broke their promise. Ludus also scared the Lord that the vampires captured him, so that he would do a better job and repent. The princess, Yulia, couldn't believe that Ludus showed up, and she gushed over his nice voice, but felt like she had heard it somewhere before. It was 2 days later, and no more vampires showed up, so Ludus decided to have a party with his familiars. The slimes were so excited because they had never had one before. Ludus saw Eris, Castle, and Nor shopping in the market, and Nor told him that she had heard about vampires infiltrating the palace, but an unknown person came to take them out, and the Lord claimed that the person was Emperor Ludus. Ludus acted like he didn't know about what Nor said, and he told her that the Lord was probably dreaming, but Nor told him that she had an odd feeling that some unknown forces had been protecting them since the Goblin attack. She felt that Emperor Ludus was Ludus's guardian angel, and that was why good things were happening, and Ludus felt relieved that she didn't discover his identity, but he knew he had to be more careful. A messenger secretly went to give a report to Empress Manaf that they found outsiders in one of the areas that they wanted to harvest. The outsiders were Ludus's familiars, and the Empress ordered her messenger to find out who the man who called himself Ludus was.